Welcome to Thriving in the Digital Age, your go to guide for navigating the ever changing world of business, technology, and innovation. With your host, Joe Christ, a seasoned entrepreneur and tech enthusiast, here to connect you with the leaders shaping our future. Discover the secrets to thriving in the digital age. Each week, we'll dive into practical insights, cutting edge strategies, and the latest trends to help your business not just survive, but truly thrive in today's digital world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Thriving the Digital Age. I'm your host, Joe Christ. Joining me today is Nick Bicanic. He's a serial entrepreneur and award-winning filmmaker. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, definitely, Joe. Thanks a lot for having me. So, as Joe, as the giveaway is in my name, I was born and raised in Croatia. Many people from that part of the world have a name that ends in "ich." In fact, almost everybody. Went to university in the UK. The accent you're hearing is slightly English, although Americans tend to call it mid-Atlantic in some cases. I was born and raised in Croatia, educated in the UK, went to university in Cambridge, postgraduate as well as undergraduate. And I have done a number of things over the years. My interests have spanned filmmaking, virtual reality, augmented reality, lots of hardware products, software products, but specifically for the last year and a half, my passion has been in the space of pickleball. And I have invented and have now brought to market with a co-founder and a number of other team members, a pickleball paddle with a replaceable surface. I'm happy to tell you more about that, but that's good for an initial round.
Okay, so you have a pretty diverse background, right? So were you formally trained in all this stuff, or are you self-taught? I mean, obviously you're working on your pickleball project now, and you've done a lot of other things with AR and VR in the past. Did you go to school for this, or were you just decided one day I'm going to pick up a book and experiment?
I'm not sure how many of us ever actually go to school these days for the thing we're actually doing. I mean, yes, back in the day, a long time ago, if you wanted to be a baker, you would apprentice as a baker, and then eventually you would become an assistant baker. And maybe if you're really lucky and you work very hard, you would one day become the head baker in the particular bakery. Honestly, these days, I mean, my undergraduate as well as my postgraduate degree was in chemistry. I specialized in physical chemistry, did a lot of work with lasers. But on one hand, I haven't done anything really to do with lasers in my entire professional life. But on the other hand, everything that I learned, to directly answer the question of were you taught to do this, I wasn't necessarily explicitly taught to do anything to do with pickleball or to do anything to do with VR and AR. But if I was taught one thing, it was how to think critically, how to approach a problem analytically, how to look at an environment. And that environment could be a film set, it could be a war zone, it could be a particular problem in a particular industry. How to look and go, what exists here? Where do I want to go? What obstacles are in the way? What assets do I have? What assets do I need? And then how do I identify a pathway to navigate the particular landscape that's in front of me to achieve my goal? But my goal, interestingly, is not, I don't think it's always as simple, and not necessarily just for me, but for anybody who's trying to do things like this that are innovative. The goal can never be, in my opinion, truly selfish. It's never about I want this. But there has to be a component of selfish passion, because if you don't have that, it's very difficult to get motivated. So I would say that the most direct answer to your question is that it's a mix of all of the above. So I would definitely I'm the fortunate benefit of many years of traditional academic education at a very high level. It's impossible to go to a place like Cambridge and not feel many aspects of that, both explicitly and implicitly. But in addition to the formal education, I was brought up in a loving family where my parents both took their time in making sure that whatever curiosity I might have, whether it's books or music or art or sports, they would indulge, like many parents do for their children. They would indulge and encourage in equal measure. So it feels like my entire life has been about learning and problem solving and education in various different ways. But there's another thing with regards to how do you do all this stuff, and it's a mix of luck, timing, skill, and experience. anybody who tells you otherwise, that luck and timing is not a big feature, is I think either lying or trying to sell you something. In reality, it's always a mix of all of the above. So no, I was never taught formally to make pickleball paddles, nor was I ever taught formally how to make virtual reality and augmented reality. But I was taught a lot of other things, and when you combine them all together and throw in a dash of passion in there, that's where my drive and my curiosity come from.
No, that's a really interesting philosophy. I think a lot of people get really stuck on having that fail-safe plan, where it's just like if I follow step A, B, it will get me to C. But I think luck does matter a lot, but it's also that having that persistence
For
until
sure.
that moment hits.
I mean, I would say that one of the things that the evolution of various aspects of technology and society has taught us, it's not that we have never had big changes before. I mean, we didn't have TVs, then we suddenly did have TVs. We didn't have motor cars, and then we suddenly did have motor cars. The issue is not that we haven't had inflection points in evolution of technology before. The issue is that they were very far spaced apart chronologically. So you had X decades or X years or X decades for society and businesses and entrepreneurs to adjust to new technology coming into place. What's happening right now is the timeline is massively compressed, which means that something new will come out, and then within a few months, in some cases, another new thing will come out. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about large language models and AI, whether you're talking about crypto and what it may or may not do to the way in which finance is conducted globally, or you're talking about things like the change between interacting on a telephone or on a keyboard and a mouse or on an iPhone, which you're touching and always carrying with you, and then all of a sudden with Apple's latest augmented reality glasses, the Vision Pro, they call it. So those kinds of leaps, as I said, have always existed in the past, but they've been much more compressed closer together. So while yes, in some ways, my passion for pickleball and changing the way in which the pickleball industry works is my current focus, all it really is the most recent incarnation of me looking at the world and seeing a balance of what's interesting to me, what's a challenging problem to solve, what gives value to the most number of people, and ultimately what is investable in. It's great to have passion when you're a creative or creator, but banging your head against a wall, trying to focus your passion in an environment where there is never any possibility for revenue and no one will ever therefore invest in what you're doing, that's a hard thing to do. There are definitely some people out there who are forced to do that because they just can't help themselves. There's a problem that they want to solve and there's absolutely no monetary gain whatsoever, but they don't care. They're going to commit their entire life to solving it. I've always tried to run a fine balance between trying to identify the things that I like, the things that are valuable to humanity overall, and the things that can have a fighting chance of a sizable return on investment. And if I can get those three things to align, I'm golden, because I'll be motivated, because it'll be valuable, and valuable to society, and it'll be valuable to investors. In general, if those three things can align, the rest is details.
It's a really interesting way of looking at things too. And you mentioned the challenges in the pickleball industry that you're trying to actually fix, right? So can you elaborate on those? Like what are you seeing in the pickleball space that's
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one way to elaborate on that is to describe the genesis of what I'm currently focusing on, what I'm doing. And the simple fact is it's almost impossible to avoid conversations about pickleball these days. Whether it's Novak Djokovic at Wimbledon openly opining at a post-match press conference that pickleball is taking over tennis court space and we need to do something about it because this virus will infect everybody, or what used to be the sport played pretty much by the 60 plus age group. So your grandma and grandpa might be talking about their pickleball buddies. All of a sudden is being played by everyone and their dog. And it shows no signs of slowing down. So I was fascinated by, okay, this is interesting. What does this mean? Because there are loads of reasons why this is a good thing. It's a good thing because it gets people outside, and we need social activity, certainly after the sociological slump that many societies felt post-COVID. the idea of something that encourages people to go outside and do physical activity, there's no way that that's a bad thing. However, as an engineer and a product person, I took a look at the space and I became really frustrated for very personal reasons. I never intended, I didn't, I need to make clear that I didn't go, I am making a business in pickleball, come hell or high water. That's not how my brain works. My brain works by going out and doing things, looking at what I enjoy, and then finding problems. And in some cases, I don't care enough about the problem to solve it. For example, if I don't know, if I go to a restaurant and I grab a salt shaker and I try and shake it onto my food and the salt doesn't come out. In my brain, I know that there are a couple of different reasons why maybe the salt is coagulated in some way, and the holes are no longer open enough and the salt can't come out. But I don't care enough to solve that problem. Maybe someone else can solve that problem. But there are problems aplenty around the world that you can see in various different ways. But in this particular case, I was very frustrated because I started really enjoying pickleball, and I bought what was at the time one of the most expensive paddles on the market. Doesn't matter who the brand is, but let's just say they were acknowledged as being the best. It cost $220, which I thought this is a decent amount of money for me to pay for a chunk of plastic. I mean, I get it; it's got carbon fiber on it, but still $220. And I was very happy with this thing. It played really nicely. It allowed me to topspin and control the ball very well. And all of a sudden, about, I don't know, maybe 3.5 weeks after owning this thing, I noticed that I couldn't quite catch the ball anymore. And to clarify what I mean by that, the way in which almost all ball sports work, doesn't matter what racket sports, doesn't matter whether it's table tennis or badminton or pickleball, when the paddle brushes the ball and causes it to spin, that is what allows you to hit the ball faster, more power, more accurately, which is better for your control and is more likely to win you the game. So it's a massive component of any kind of racket sports. I noticed that my paddle could no longer topspin the ball as effectively. And I thought, well, that's a bummer. Maybe there's something wrong with it. So I contacted the company and I say, hey, the guys, can I do a warranty thing? Because something's wrong. This thing is wearing out. It's almost smooth. And they said, yeah, sure, no problem. Here you go. Yeah, here's your replacement. Okay. I thought, cool, problem solved. Move on to the next thing. Except 3 weeks later, same thing happened, same paddle. So I thought, that's odd. I wonder if maybe it's a bad batch. So I contact the company again and I go, guys, sorry, I don't know if it's a bad batch, but I had the same problem. They said, yeah, well, too bad. There's nothing you can do about it. And I'm like, what do you mean? They said, well, replacement paddles are not covered under warranty. And I look, and it's an industry standard. Everybody has the same. I'm not in any way trying to single out this company by saying they were somehow doing something evil. Not at all. Everybody was doing the same thing. So I thought that's a bummer. So basically, what are you supposed to do? So I start talking to some professional players and some high-level competitive players, and they all go, yeah, that's just how it is. They all wear out.
That's insane.
And I'm like, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm trying to do the math in my head right now.
Yeah.
So say you spend about $220 on a paddle, and in less than a month, right, it's no longer good, right? So you're spending.
So you're right, but let me just clarify this, just so people understand the implications of this. Clearly, if you play once a month with your buddies and you just chill out, you have a couple of drinks and you're hanging out enjoying yourself and you play for 45 minutes and that's about it, and you play once a month, this is not a problem that will affect you. However, if you play frequently, which a lot of people do, and the number of people that do is increasing, you will notice the surface degradation incredibly quickly. This wasn't, given my science background, it wasn't enough for me to hear from everybody, oh, this degrades all the time. And it wasn't enough for me to hear from people who were saying, when I asked them, what do you do to solve this problem? They go, we just buy a new one. And I go, I don't understand. You buy a new paddle every month for $220? And they go, oh no, we buy a new paddle more frequently than that if we're competing. If we're competing, we'd swap paddles out every 2 to 3 weeks. So I just thought, this is insane. Would you toss your car if the tires wore out? No, of course you wouldn't. You replace the tires. Same thing with a tennis racket. You don't toss a tennis racket when the strings break. You restring it. So I thought, this is ridiculous. Let's apply some science to this. It wasn't enough for me to think about this conversationally. I did the math, or I did the data, or I did the study. I twisted a lot of arms, called in a lot of favors, and got about approximately $500,000 worth of analysis equipment. laser 3D scanners, all kinds of different analytics, and ball machines, and basically we constructed an experiment where we defined what we consider to be a day of play. We happened to pick 544 hands. It doesn't matter what we picked. I mean, we picked an arbitrary number on the basis of analysis of high-level play and estimating what 2 hours of play would approximately look like. And then we did what you would do if you were doing this experiment in a sensible way. 544 hands analyze the paddle. 544 hands analyze the paddle, and we called that was called a day. We did that 30 times in a row. It took a long time. It took about 4 weekends worth of hitting and analyzing and 3D microscopes and calibrations. And in the end, we were astounded to discover that you lose 25% of your surface roughness of a pickleball paddle in 7 days of play. And you lose, it's exponential, so it's not like it continues. To get to 50% is 30 days of play. But either way, 50% in 30 days of play was insane. And it was insane that we were in an environment where this is like the pickleball industry was selling picks and shovels in a gold rush. Everybody wanted a pickleball paddle. And if you had a premium pickleball paddle, then everybody who wants to improve, they keep on wanting to buy the cool equipment. It's like when you play golf, you want to buy the cool golf gear. You don't want to buy the crappy stuff that's $10 on Amazon. I mean, you can, but there's definitely a strong sector of the market in a popular sport that wants to get the improved equipment because they understand that the improved equipment will help. It's not everything, but it's definitely a part of a high-level game. So I was astounded by the fact that the degradation was so fast. And it was at that moment, it was when I started out with a pain point that was personal to me because I was frustrated by paying $220. And then it continued with the data to back it up. The moment that I knew that this stuff degrades so fast, I knew that this had to be redone. There had to be a way to basically make the outer surface of a pickleball paddle consumable or replaceable, if you wish. And that's exactly what the company became. I mean, obviously, and there's a lot of other things behind the scenes that we don't have to go to in details because if you are experienced as an entrepreneur, you do not enter a space like this without filing the appropriate IP. So clearly I did all of that very early on before I talked to anyone about it because I knew that when push came to shove down the line, if I had the IP locked up, I'd be in a very, very interesting position. But again, this is not about let's lock up the IP and sit on it like a patent troll. This wasn't just IP. This was idea, analysis, proof points, IP, then a long series of development to identify, what is the correct adhesive in order to do this correctly. So you can keep on taking it off and putting it back on with no residue being left behind. So it's stable in all kinds of temperatures. So it's a long way between an idea and something like this, which is ultimately what ends up being the end product. A pickleball paddle on which you can remove the textured outer surface and put it back whenever you want. Why? Because for 3 simple reasons. It's better performance because you're not having to deal with degradation immediately. If it ever degrades, you just peel it off and put it back on. It's better value because you don't have to buy a new paddle every time. And also, honestly, it's better for the environment. There is a massive amount of waste created in pickleball. There are lots of estimates. I don't want to quote them because they just sound insane and I can't verify the data. But let's just say there's tons upon tons of waste that gets created. I mean, pickleball balls like this, they crack depending on the temperature. If you're playing in cold climates, these things crack every half an hour. And they're $3 each. So you just have to toss them. It's bananas, right? Except everybody loves the sport, but the sport has some interesting problems that they have to solve. The thing I decided to focus on was, can we create a product which can replace the grit without sacrificing the performance that everybody expects? In other words, can it feel right? Because it's all well and good creating a replaceable surface, but unless you get the balance of adhesive, thickness, coefficient of restitution, touch, and feel, unless you get that balance correct, you don't have a product because people are not going to want to play with it. So that took a long time, but we got there, and it's exciting. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer. Was that
I
kind of
love
okay?
that though.
Okay.
I was thinking about that. So where I'm at in Arizona, pickleball is big. It is, and I'm one of those guys who plays for 45 minutes every now and then with my friends, and I'm not great at pickleball, but the people who I do meet who are 3 hours a day.
Yeah, it's easy. That's the thing. By the way, the data that I talked about, it's worth pointing this out. The data that I talked about, which is 25% in 7 to 10 days and 50% in 30 days, that is based on a certain level of player. For the sake of argument, 4.5 to 5.0. The numbers refer to a ranking system known as Duper, which is a very common ranking system in pickleball. Let's just say that not pro level, but still lots of ability to hit hard and have controlled games. Pros use them as hitting partners, that level. So at that level of play, we're talking about the degradation that I'm talking about, but that's at 2 hours a day. You increase the number of hours per day, or you increase the level of player, all of a sudden the numbers get worse. So if you're a high level competitive player, you're like playing pro qualifying tournaments, you're looking at 3 to 4 days to get to 25% and 10 to 20 days. It's crazy, right?
That's insane.
But here's the thing. If you put yourself into the shoes of a traditional pickleball brand, it's not obvious that they want this to exist. Because if you're capable of selling, for the sake of argument, let's take a nice round number and say that the majority of these paddles, the existing paddles on the market, are made in China, and the majority of them cost approximately between $25 and $30 landed, which means manufacturing, shipping, duties, etc. Let's call it $30. So if you're selling a $30 product to people for $235, there's some that are even more expensive than that. Even if you tack on top of that retail margins or e-commerce costs of customer acquisition, you still have a pretty hefty profit. The idea that, hey, if it wears out, you got to buy another one. That's a good thing for the bottom line if the customers are willing to do it. It's just a bad thing for the customers and a bad thing longer term for the environment. So the question is, can you construct a business like this where everybody wins? And I believe you can, because I believe that even though there's a school of thought that says, hey, that's great, you've made a replaceable pickleball paddle surface. We hate you. We're never going to work with you because you're messing with our meal ticket. We're knowingly selling paddles to people that degrade in 30 days. We don't care because they're going to have to buy another paddle, and that's more money for us. They're a bit pissed off. Too bad. They're buying it anyway. Well, there is another way of looking at this, which is make the customer happier. The customer is going to be loyal, because otherwise, every time that the paddle degrades, the customer looks at it and goes, well, that sucked. I paid $220 for this thing, and it lasted for 4 weeks. I'm going to try another one, and I'm going to try another one. You can't hang on to them. But if you treat them ever so slightly with more respect, and you deliver them a product that appeals more to their ability to have maximum performance when they want and much better value, you get a recurring customer. Your long-term costs go down, so your revenue per customer goes up. So there is, not to mention the fact that you have a recurring revenue business, which in the end could provide you more overall enterprise value. So there is a way of looking at this that's actually better for the companies. But if you're thinking short-sighted, if you're thinking money grab, yeah, for sure, I can see why existing companies might not be super happy about somebody creating something like this.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? Having that recurring monthly revenue coming in because you're actually keeping customers happy with good products, right? And I see that a lot nowadays too. Not a lot, but I do see companies that are focused on the quick money grab, right? Like, hey, how can we make this like really amazing product and follow a trend just to cash out early? And they don't really think about the longevity of the business. But when you actually really do have that more customer-centric approach, it's like, hey, we do care about our customers. And not only that, you mentioned too about the environment, right? Putting ESG in there as well. Like, it's like, hey, we are a company that does right by our customers.
I mean, look, yeah. So just to give you an idea, so this is this is deliberately unbranded because I don't like the idea of like throwing shade at any particular brand on the market. I'm happy to throw shade at all of them, but not at any particular ones. The generic pickleball paddle is rigidly bonded. You've got super glue in here or cyanoacrylates. You've got epoxy resins holding together polypropylene and carbon fiber. You've got polypropylene in the butt cap, TPU in the overgrip. All these things rigidly bonded together makes for an impossibility of recycling. It's just cost prohibitive. Even if you could separate the materials, which in some cases is very hard to do, it's almost impossible to do it. It's actually not even almost. It is impossible to do and make it cost effective. So basically nobody does it. It's impossible to recycle. But this, which is the consumable component, in fact, let me just make it even more obvious by taking one off. This is essentially, with the exception of the adhesive layer and a tiny bit of we call this a pull tab. It's a woven tab, which makes it very easy to remove and put back on. With the exception of those two pieces, which are easy to remove, this is essentially pure carbon fiber. So I'm not giving you a theoretical argument. We did this. We went to multiple different recyclers, some in the EU, some in Korea, that specialize in carbon fiber recycling. 75% of the carbon fibers in this can be recovered to be used in additional products, which is huge longer term, especially because guess what? This thing you're not throwing out. You can just keep reusing it, the paddle base. You keep reusing it with new versions of this. So overall, yeah, the ESG component is significant.
Yeah. And I really appreciate it myself, right? And I think that's something, as society, we need to really be focusing on when we build these products is, we're all trapped on the same planet together until we go to Mars or wherever else, but we really do have to take care of the world we're on. And keeping that in mind when it comes to actually developing these things, that's a big deal, right? Because that does impact people.
I know, I 100% agree. But you see, for me, it was very important. I'm a kind of equipment nerd, like many people in various different sports and activities and passions. I like to have the best stuff, and I like to know what the best stuff is. It was very important for me that if I'm going to be building a premium product, in other words, one that has to appeal to the highest level of performer, there cannot be any compromises in the performance. In other words, if this product was like, hey, it's really green and makes the world a better place, but it's kind of a crappy paddle, that might be noble, but nobody would buy it. And likewise, if I make a product that's amazing, except you're basically like burning gas from your exhaust while using it, also not the greatest feeling, it may not work so well. But due to a number of different things, luck, circumstance, skill, experience, and lots of effort, I've ended up with something that actually, we call this the reload triple threat. Because as I mentioned before, it's one, better for performance. Because think about it, the moment, yes, when you buy the brand new $220 paddle, day one, you have an amazing paddle. Day 7, you have a problem. So it's really interesting how fast you have a problem. Whereas day 1, these things are neck and neck. But day 7, with a regular paddle, you're already going, I'm starting to feel this. Day 30, you really are feeling it. Whereas whenever you feel it with our paddle, you just rip it off and put on another one. And now you have a brand new paddle again. So if we do this, and sorry, the third thing was the environment. So better performance, better value, and better for the environment, that's the triple threat. But yeah, all of those things were, take any one of those things away, you still have an okay business. But altogether, the three of them are a very powerful cocktail, because overall, it means that whichever way you slice it, you go, this is a better mousetrap. Everything should be this way. And this is one of the reasons why, I've had a lot of inbound interest from, again, I don't want to name them, but let's just say if you consider the top 10 companies in pickleball, pick any of them, and they've all come in and said, hey, listen, we're really interested. Let's talk about licensing. What does this look like? And it's really interesting because the first two that I had this conversation with all opened by saying, we want exclusivity. We want to lock this up. And I said, you can't have that. We're not going to do that. And they said, why wouldn't you do that? It's a really lucrative deal. And I said, because the point isn't to lock up something like this. The point is that the entire industry needs to do this. It is absolutely ridiculous to be selling tens of thousands of paddles, knowingly degrading over a short period of time, counting on the fact that many customers won't realize they degrade. Many customers will be like, well, this thing's only a couple of weeks old. It can't be that. It must be me. I can't blame the paddle. The manufacturers know full well how fast this stuff degrades. It's a question of, can they come around to approaching this in a slightly different way? So yes, the aim here is definitely to try to, let's say, fix pickleball paddles overall. In order to do that, I had to develop a paddle. I had to develop a brand, because if I just knock on the door of some companies early on and I said, hey, look, I've got some IP. Do you guys want it? Maybe they do it, but more likely they would just go away. We're quite happy selling $30 products for $220. Why would we even talk to you? So in a way, I had to build a brand. Like this is full on. I mean, I know we can't show it here to everybody, but if people go to reloadpickleball.com, they can very quickly understand that the way this is branded, every aspect of the visual communication of this, from the way the paddle looks, the colors, the construction, the every aspect of it, the assets that we use, the videos, the animations, we're looking at something very different. From my perspective, when I look at branding, I don't think, let's look at what the other competitors in my market are doing. I look at the best brands in the world. So as far as I'm concerned, my competition isn't other pickleball paddles from the branding perspective. My competition is Nike and Apple, because that's where the bar is. And I think that if you don't try and strive beyond what's currently available out there, if you just go, well, everybody else is just doing black paddles, let's just do like a black paddle with a stupid logo on it. Great. But nothing really changes. The way we actually make big changes, if we just go, you know what? No, let's make the best thing. All the other brands look kind of crappy. Cool. Let's do a better brand. Let's do a better. Let's do everything. Let's do everything better if it's possible. Obviously, if it doesn't bankrupt you, but as long as you can keep that in mind, then push limits.
So you brought up an interesting word too, and I think it's a great segue into the next question, right? So change, right? So obviously you want to be the best brand out there. You want to make real change. So what does the future look like to you when it comes to the sport of pickleball and even the product you're putting out there? Like how do you
So
see it really impacting?
it's a complicated, multi-layered question, but I'll do my best. It's a very important question. So when I first started in pickleball, prior to Reload being even an idea, this is just me being interested as an external observer. I started with a significant amount of disdain, and that is not uncommon in pickleball. I first time I picked up a tennis racket, I was 5 years old. While I played a lot of tennis in my teen years, it was never beyond club level. It wasn't my main sport was basketball. I played basketball at national level in the UK, under 15s, under 17s, under 21s, European championships. It was decent up until college. I played a lot, but racket sports for me, it was only tennis. It was old school. Tennis was the thing. I loved playing tennis. I was a decent enough player that I really enjoyed it. And when I first looked at pickleball, I did what a lot of tennis players, former tennis players, would do, is I just thought, well, this is stupid. This is for people who can't do sports. This is not for athletes. This is just a sport for old people. Look, this court is so small. It's so slow. What is this stupid plastic ball? And it was interesting because the way my opinion changed about pickleball and what pickleball can do, what happened very quickly. I walked into it thinking, I don't even want to do this. I think somebody asked me to do it, to just try it out. I think I had just had knee surgery, so I couldn't run on a tennis court yet. So I was interested in my recovery. What could I do? Let's try it out. But something happened after day two. It happened pretty quickly. And that was that I noticed something that I'd never seen in a sport before, which is that I noticed that a high-level player with a lot of hand-eye coordination could still enjoy themselves with a lower-level player, like a complete beginner. And again, I'm not suggesting that the lower-level player can win. Clearly, that's not the issue. The issue is that, not to put too fine a point on it, if I went on a tennis court with a friend of mine who had played very little tennis before, within 5 minutes I would be bored. Because they wouldn't be able to serve, they wouldn't be able to return my serve, they wouldn't be able to get the ball across the net. The level of skill required to even start is so high that it's demoralizing to new people. They'll just never do it. But pickleball did something really interesting. Not only was the level of skill required to learn it very low, but on top of that, there was an unusual balancing act. There's no way the founders of pickleball intended for this to happen. This was a happy accident, but it doesn't matter. It was unusual because it allowed a higher level player to play with a lower level player, and still both players got something out of it. And it's incredibly socially empowering because of this, because it means that people in most sports, especially racket sports, you need a lot of determination to make it through the initial, I suck, I don't want to do this again, period. But in pickleball, it gives you just enough of that endorphin rush, because at the very beginning, it's very easy to just, I mean, again, if you're significant movement difficulties or you're injured or there's a variety of different kind of musculoskeletal conditions that will make it impossible. But in most cases, if you can walk and throw an object, you can do the basics of playing pickleball. And it's enough to get people hooked. And then really interesting things happen. So the reason why I'm answering in such a long-winded way is because it's an interesting question to ask of what will pickleball do? Because pickleball is an unusual example of a sport, albeit having a very, let's say, unusual name and not a particularly cool name at all. It's a sport that is far less watched than it is played. So it's amazing. For example, you would imagine that if you get a networking event together, I went to one the other day, if you get a networking event together and it happens on a pickleball court, that it would be kind of cool because everyone's into pickleball and they can all hang out and talk. No, they all want to play. It doesn't work. People just want to play pickleball all the time. It's this weird activity that just encourages continuous play and competitive play, which is fascinating because it doesn't follow the patterns of traditional sports, where in traditional sports, you build the sport around phenomenal athletes like LeBron James, or Michael Jordan, much earlier than that. And you build it around these people who do superhuman feats that nobody can possibly emulate, and everybody loves watching them because of it. And you get all these fans that love following the sport. But pickleball is interesting because people just love playing it at various different levels. So I couldn't help myself but observe this time and again. My girlfriend's parents, who while they were outdoors a lot, they tended to be outdoors in low impact activities. They never did any competitive sports together, or if they did, it was 30, 40 years ago. We introduced them to pickleball. All of a sudden they're playing every day and they have a totally new set of friends and they're more active. It's healthier for them and they get to do something together as a couple. There's a lot of mixed doubles. Mixed doubles is the most popular form of pickleball. So I became extremely bullish on the sport overall, and the economics of the sport were kind of fascinating to explore. So in answer to your question, is I genuinely believe that the pickleball explosion is not slowing down, it's speeding up because it's pretty much exclusively grown in the United States. I mean, yes, other countries have bits and pieces of it, but it's nothing in comparison to the US. Over the next 1 to 2 years, there's a massive push in expanding it. Initially, Australia, India, and UK are the three most promising territories, but Vietnam, China are close behind, and it shows from a social and demographic perspective, it shows no signs of slowing down and it'll follow a similar pattern in those countries. You can play pickleball if you're 8, but you can also play pickleball if you're 80, and and not only that, you can play together. I mean, the first pickleball game I played, I think I played against two people who were 70 and 80, and they kicked my ass. Now, fine, if I play aggressively, I will comfortably beat those people today easily, but I don't have to play aggressively. I can tone the game down a notch, practice a different kind of slower shot. It'll still be challenging for me, and it'll be really enjoyable for them. And that is a really rare thing in a physical activity. So yeah, that's a kind of long-winded answer to
No, that
the
was good
question.
though. I mean,
But
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, but on the equipment side, by the way, on the equipment side, I firmly believe that in the future, it will be the industry will have to change to a paddle surface system akin to ours, which is replaceable. If at the moment we were the first people to go down this path. We have a certain amount of IP that has already been granted. We have a significant quantity of IP inheriting the same priority date, which is in the process of making its way through the system, which we're extremely confident about. So there's every possibility that in the future there are interesting things from a financial perspective for Reload. But that's not the only answer here. The answer is it's not just about paddle equipment. It's not just about how much money Reload might be able to make from people licensing its IP. It's also about looking at what this industry is doing, what the governing body is doing, what happens when a sport is slowly birthed and eventually maybe becomes an Olympic sport. There are a lot of variables, and there's a lot of sharks in this space. There's a lot of people who are doing this for for the right reasons. There's also some people doing it for the wrong reasons. And it's fascinating. It's like right now, without going into nuances, there's kind of a Game of Thrones going on in pickleball, where there's multiple different organizations jockeying for position and trying to figure out who's going to be able to be in charge. But at the end of the day, yes, that's noisy, and yes, that can be complicated if you're on the wrong side of the Game of Thrones. But at the same time, as a sport, no matter what happens, it's not going to kill the sport. The genie is out of the bottle very firmly, and I think it's just going to continue.
I love that. It's really exciting to watch, and I've seen it myself, like how fast pickleball has grown out here, right? And how fanatic some people get about it. I mean, I like it too. It's very fun, and I'm not a terribly athletic guy when it comes to paddle sports, but yeah, no, it's I see it myself, and I like that you brought up, the whole idea of like the Olympics, right? Like that's a very real possibility, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I do have one last question for you. So Nick, you've done a lot in your life, from multiple companies to making films. There's a lot of really young entrepreneurs out there. People are really starting up, and just people who are looking for opportunity to make the world better. Like, what advice would you give them, if you can give them anything at all?
So yeah, the $1 million question. It's, I mean, the most obvious advice to give, which I have seen people surprised by when it happens to them for the first time, is don't be afraid to try. And I know that sounds like a simplistic thing to say, but trying, it's in the word, right? Trying assumes that there's a possibility of failure. If there's no possibility of failure, it's not a try, it's a do. It's like, go and grab this, right? You're not going to fail at grabbing this object from the table, but go and try to accomplish X. Go and try with this idea. The reason why I think it's important to try, and it's important to try as early as possible. I mean, there's 100 different ways of saying this, like fail fast, fail early. I think it's vital to try, because if you're the type of person who comes up with an idea and who isn't willing to accept the world as it is and goes, there's a better way of doing this, I would like to do something that's better. Unless you try, guess what? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The only way that we can all collectively, every single entrepreneur out there, big or small, the only way that we can collectively change the world is one effort at a time. So don't get discouraged thinking there's no point in trying this because it's, there's bigger companies out there. If they've never tried this before, so therefore if they've never tried it before, then why would I even bother? It's never going to work. It's doomed to failure. That's not always the case. But that doesn't mean that as advice, like, so step one, never be afraid to try, never be afraid to fail. But step two is learn and absorb as much information as possible. If you see something that's interesting, and if you can afford to do it, take it apart, break it, try and figure out what makes it tick. It doesn't matter whether the object is a pen or a calculator, or I'm just looking around randomly here on my desk, or a pickleball paddle, but understand how things work. And that's not just about objects, it's also about processes. For example, if there is a bus that arrives and it's always arriving late, and you're pissed off that the bus arrives late because your grandma who's always on that bus is always sitting there waiting and her legs hurt, and you want to fix the bus system, try and understand how it works. Don't just be angry. If you want to fix something, try and understand how it works, because the more you understand how things work, the more you understand how you can make them better. That involves something which many in the current generation are, unfortunately, in my experience, a little bit lazy to do, which is look at things. Open the box, look under the tin, look under the rug. What makes this tick? What process? Where's the money coming from? Where's the logistics coming from? What kind of fuel are the buses running on? How are people communicating about them? So there are many things that you can have ideas about. They're not all physical objects. Some of them could be pieces of software. Some of them could be processes. Some of them could be political systems. It doesn't matter what it is, but if there's one thing that the evolution of our society and of our companies and technologies out there has taught us, is that you can never stay an incumbent for too long. Sure, I mean, to use a commonly quoted example, when MySpace was the thing, everybody thought, oh my God, MySpace is the biggest. What's the point of anyone ever doing anything else? Yeah, Facebook came along and suddenly it was like, oh shit, everyone's got Facebook, MySpace is dead. When Instagram started, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the story, the listeners or you, but Kevin Systrom was never intending to make Instagram. He was intending to make some kind of an app that he himself admits was totally daft for sharing what bar you were hanging out at with your friends the night before. And nobody cared. It was called Bourbon. You can look this up. And then one day they happened to notice that the photos sharing feature of that app was used ever so slightly more than the other features. They reshaped the app, they made it just about photos, and less than 2 years later, they were bought by Facebook for over $1 billion. What I'm saying is, don't be afraid to try. And it's very easy to get discouraged when you go, well, I can't do this because I'm going to need $10 million and I can't even try. Yeah, okay, fine. If the idea that you have requires $10 million to start, you might have a problem. Maybe you need to scale it down a little bit. That doesn't mean your idea is bad. It just means you're not yet ready to be experimenting with that kind of idea. But there are plenty of ideas these days that certainly it doesn't take $10 million to think about a problem. Google is free. ChatGPT is free. You can learn so much from observing how things are out there just by look at what other people are doing. The reason why the phrase stand on the shoulders of giants exists is because everything that has come before you, it doesn't matter whether I'm looking at history books from 100 years ago or ideas from 6 months ago, it's all standing on the shoulders of giants, because the way I look at it is, what did they do wrong? What don't I like about a certain product or a process or a political system? What could be done better? What do I care enough about changing? So I guess if I had to summarize all of what I just said in 2 things, I would say, 1, don't be afraid to try, and 2, use the tools that are available to you to learn that are free, because they're more powerful. We have more information available to us for free these days than previous generations have had for untold quantities of dollars. And it's just there. It's there for the taking. That doesn't mean everyone can do it. But if you're the type of person who's motivated and wants to and has a curious mind, there is no barrier to trying to think. When you get to the next level and you go, okay, now I need some money to implement, that's okay. Because if you've thought something through and you can present an identification of a problem, a solution, and a potential reason why your solution is a good idea, yeah, there are plenty of guys out there who have checkbooks. You got to get to them, different level of problem. Every mountain you have to climb to get your idea to market is climbable. People have done it. Believe me, I've done it. Other people have done it, and people will continue to do it. So yeah, don't be afraid to try and learn as much as you can. Be analytical. There's no free rides. It's not luck. Yes, fine, there'll be elements of luck, but you don't just click your fingers and suddenly you have a successful idea. You need to go through the process.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Well, hey, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot, not just about pickleball, but also really how to develop good products, right? And to the audience out there, I hope you learned as much as I have. Again, thank you everyone for coming today, listening and learning.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thanks a lot for having me, and thanks everyone.
And everyone, join us next week for another exciting episode of Thrive in the Digital Age. See you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Thriving in the Digital Age. We hope today's episode gave you some great tips for navigating and rocking the digital world. Remember to hit subscribe for more awesome tips, strategies, and expert talks on thriving in the digital age. Stay connected, stay informed, and keep on thriving.